So, we are, of course, here. Now we're going to go over to India. And right above India is a little country of Nepal. And on the border of Nepal and the Tibet province of China is Mount Everest.
Oh, so close.
You like that? Tibet province of China. As you fly into Kathmandu, Everest is higher than all the other peaks around and has this beautiful snow plume on it. The first ascensionists, or the first people to attempt it, were the British in the 1920s, led by George Mallory. He went in 1921, 22, and 24, and disappeared in 1924 along with his partner Andrew Irvine. And the way they came in, Nepal was closed to travel, so they came in through Darjeeling, India, came up through the jungles in Sikkim and Bhutan and up on the Tibetan Plateau, came across the Tibetan Plateau and then explored different riverbeds and valleys, and it took them a whole month to get to Everest Base Camp. And looking out, seeing it for the first time, they kind of came up onto a hill and the clouds slowly kind of parted away, and it gave them, kind of form and shape for the very first time. And like you can just imagine in 1921 hearing about this and then seeing it right there for the first time, and then as the clouds completely parted away, and there it is on a very, very rare day where there's not much of a snow plume. And that lets you know it's a pretty good time to try to climb Everest. And so that 1924 trip, their clothing back then was wool tweed coats, wool slacks, wool scarves, felt caps, and several layers of silk long underwear, and heavy primitive oxygen bottles. And they were last seen right here at the second step, which is kind of the crux of the whole climb. And then a cloud came over the summit, and they're never found again. In 1933, they found Irvine's ice axe down here. And then in 1999, Conrad Anker and a few others found Mallory's body in a line below this ice axe. And he had evidence of a broken leg, and he had a cut rope, hemp rope around his waist. And so nobody knows if they summited or not. I like to believe that they did because I want to believe it, but there's no concrete evidence. The one little piece of evidence they found on Mallory, he had letters from his wife tucked into his breast pocket, and he always carried a picture of his wife on his trips that he buried on the tops of his peaks. And there's no picture in his breast pocket when they found him. So that's one little piece of evidence he may have made it. But, so anyways, that drawing looks like this for real. There's the north face of Everest. There's the second step right there, and here's the whole north face where the whole accident happened. And so after the 1924 expedition, the British built this memorial in honor of Mallory and Irvine and a bunch of Sherpas who were killed in an avalanche in 1922. And the last people to see this were the British in 1947. And then in 1950, China invaded Tibet, took the country over, and then sealed it off to travel for 30 years. And in the early 80s, when, again, Westerners were traveling here, this was no longer there. And so 74 years after George Mallory disappeared, his grandson would come to Mount Everest as part of our expedition, and that's myself and him. And he looks a lot like his grandfather, and he finished what may have been unfinished business by his grandfather when he summited and got back down safely. And so our team consisted of 20 people from all over the U.S., and George Mallory lives in Australia. And there's Kathmandu, a very dirty, overcrowded city that you start in. And then this is going along roads. This particular thing is a landslide that took out our road completely. We had to carry all of our gear from one side of it to the other. And then we used these Chinese army trucks to get all of our gear in to base camp, and then we drove in Toyota Land Cruisers. And this is base camp on the north side of Everest at 17,000 feet. And for an expedition of 20 people for 2 months, it has about 7 tons worth of food and equipment, about 50 tents that went to 7 different camps, several thousand feet of climbing rope, and boxes of other supplies. And out of this team of 20 people, 12 of us were climbing team members, and 8 were base camp managers and support people and team doctor. And so here's our strategy. From base camp, you move up, place gear at Camp 1, return to base camp. Next day, load up more gear, bring it to Camp 1, and then sleep here. Then you move up to Camp 2, leave some gear, and come back down to base camp. And load up more gear, bring it up here. And eventually by doing that, you're going to get up to ABC, Advanced Base Camp at 21.5. And then as you get here in late March, start moving up these camps. And then as the spring wears on, you get up to the North Call at 23,000 feet. That's Camp 4. Camp 5 at 25.8. And Camp 6 at 27.2. And your goal is to get there by early May. And then from here, it's a one-day shot to the summit and back. So George Mallory, along with the rest of us, loading up our gear and moving up the mountain. And as you start spreading out, communication is always important. So we have radios with us all the time and check in 3 times a day talking about how we're feeling and the status of the camps. And this is 1995, and so that satellite phone I held in my hand on top of Karsten's, that's what it looked like back then. And these are 2 computers that Dell gave us with the brand new hot 486 processor. And we had one little mishap early on. Everybody's boot soles started delaminating, and because we got a bad batch of boots where bad glue was used, and so I sent a fax home through that satellite system to my parents in Bishop. They boxed up a bunch of supplies, gave that box to UPS. UPS ships that to Kathmandu and hands the box to a group of trekkers who's going into Everest Base Camp, and 2 weeks later we got a box to fix our boots. And then meanwhile we had spare pairs of boots for climbing low down on the mountain, getting up as far as Advanced Base Camp. And now those Neve Penitentes from Aconcagua, now they're big ice towers that can be 40, 50 feet high. And so here's Advanced Base Camp at 21.5. The north. What's that?
What did you use to fix your boots up at that altitude?
So we used cement, like barge cement, and we screwed screws into them, and then we put them next to propane heaters so the glue would cure correctly. And we did that kind of one boot at a time until we got it all fixed. So, and then once we got them fixed, then we were able to climb higher than ABC. And so the North Col is just out of the photo there, and then you go up the North Ridge here, and that's the final summit pyramid about 7,500 feet above us. And so with our boots fixed, we start making our way up through this terrain this way to the North Col. And once we establish a route, we put fixed line in there, so now we can travel independently of each other, which your pace varies a lot day to day when you're moving towards 23,000 feet. Here's my crampons from about halfway up. There's ABC right down there. And at the North Col, this winds have been clocked at over 150 miles an hour. And so the tents we use, this is a wild country tent they don't make anymore. What replaced this now is the Mountain Hardware Trango 3.1. But we bought this commercial fishing netting and then fed polypropylene rope into this netting and then stretched this over the bodies of the tents and then anchored those in with snow pickets. And that's how we kept our tents secure the entire time up there. And this is a night shot, that's the moon, and it lit up this snow ramp and our route moving quite nicely up towards Camp 5, which is in the rocks here, and then Camp 6 along this horizontal line of snow at 27.2. And so moving up along that snow ramp, we put in more fixed line, and then there's the North Col down below me there, and then this Camp 5 is the most exposed one on the whole mountain. And the particular tent we used here was made by Jansport. They called it the China Everest tent. It was made for this mountain. 2-person tent that weighed 14 pounds and had 7 poles.
Nice.
But it's solid. Solid tent. Put a netting system on it, and then our Sherpas added the prayer flags, and that's the reason they stayed there. The tent stayed there. And then above Camp 5, that's where I started using oxygen. It took me 6 deep breaths for every step uphill just to get moving up to Camp 5. And so with the oxygen on, I was down to about 2 breaths per step. And then by the time I hit the summit, I was back up to 4 to 6 deep breaths per step with the oxygen. And a warm day, you can see I'm unzipped here down to my waist and no wool cap on. And in early May, we got our final camp in place, and although we're 1,800 feet from the top, the weather's not, it's snowing here, the weather's not suitable for a summit attempt, and we got to go down and rest anyways. And so we talked on the radio, me and my glassy eyes up there, and then turned around, got back down to base camp, and started planning our strategy for summiting and hydrating and getting all food and energy back up. And then this was kind of a closing of a circle that I thought was kind of cool. It's my last story of this slideshow. There's George Mallory Jr. and his parents, whose father is the son of George Mallory Sr., visited us at base camp, along with an American cinematographer you may have heard of named David Breeshears.
Really?
And that's David Breeshears. And they brought with them a plaque that commemorated Mallory and Irvine, and they brought with them concrete that we mixed by hand, and that's David Breeshears with the sign there. And we put this plaque firmly into rock on top of a little hill called Memorial Hill at base camp. And this was to replace that memorial that was that's no longer there. And then everybody around on the mountain that spring gathered around this plaque for a dedication ceremony. It didn't really matter whether they understood English or not. The historical significance of all this wasn't lost on anybody there. And then John Mallory slowly makes his way to the top of Memorial Hill. This walk that took us about 5 minutes took him about 40 minutes. He had 2 hip replacements and needed a cane for support just to stand. And just living at 17,000 feet was a huge feat for him. And as he started making his way up there, it was like, man, this has got to be the hardest thing he's done in his life. But he was really determined. Had his whole life to think about this. This is the first time he'd ever actually been here to see where his father disappeared. And he kind of stood among this big crowd, kind of staring up, getting closer to himself. And then he turned to us and delivered a few words of inspiration as we got ready to make our own summit attempts. And then George Mallory Jr. delivered some words of his own, and he placed 3 rocks along the base of the plaque that signified various things he said. And now this plaque sits here as we hope a more permanent memorial to that one that was originally destroyed. And as future expeditions visit this plaque, they'll help keep the concrete from cracking and fill it in as it needs to, and kind of keep alive the memory of those first pioneering mountaineers on Mount Everest in a very real way, upon whose shoulders all of us now as climbers kind of now stand on top of, and they laid the foundation for it. And so as that dedication ceremony finished, the snow plume that shows itself proudly throughout the spring starts to disappear. And what's going on is, right as you hit a change of seasons, the jet stream winds that are pounding the upper reaches of Mount Everest, they actually lift up as the summer monsoons are starting to boil up in India, and it's the classic calm before the storm. And so if you look, when everybody summited Mount Everest, it's on this springtime before the monsoons come, or in the fall before the winter storms hit. And so when you see the snow plume leaving and you see it calm up there, your window is opening up. That window could be a couple days or it could be a week. You don't know, but you're going to go up and you're going to stick your nose in it and see if it'll hold long enough for you. And so one thing, we all expressed a similar sentiment as we felt as strong as we had at any point throughout our climbing career. And we knew, even if we didn't summit, we're going to give this one good, honest attempt. And so 3 days before I topped out on the summit, I left Advanced Base Camp and I stared up at the summit pyramid over 7,000 feet above me, and I reflected back on all the places I'd climbed over the years, and all the people I'd climbed with, and all the people I'd given mountaineering guiding and instruction to over the years, which I've been guiding 30 years now. They number in the tens of thousands of people that I've been able to share journeys with on mountains in the Sierra and all over the world, and it was kind of a little bit of reflection and thinking about my family and all of them halfway around the world, knowing I'm going for the summit, and so then moving on, the next camp goes up to the North Col. And the truth of the matter is, when I showed this slideshow for years, just seeing these pictures was too emotional to actually talk about. And for the longest time, I would show these slides, and the only way I could do it was just to go silent and like play music and just sort of enjoy the moment with everybody else. And so being able to see this and you know, look back on it now, that first trip was 1995. We're now in 2016. We're coming up on 21-year anniversary of this. And when you see a lazy cloud like this above the North Col, you know that's a good sign. And so moving higher, this is my partner Steve Reneker. He lives right here in Riverside. And looking way down below me is the North Col. There, this is Everest Satellite Peak Changxi. It's about 24.5. And then above that snow ramp, weaving our way up through the rocks there. And this is sunset at Camp 5 at 25,800 feet, one of the most dramatic sunsets I've ever seen in my life. And then moving up towards Camp 6, here's that horizontal line of snow, and there's the summit pyramid over there. And whenever you stop and take a break, you can actually take off your oxygen mask a minute and have some food and water. And so that's what I'm doing there. And you put the mask back on and climb up towards high camp. So here's high camp, perched on a little shelf that's really not all that level. And that's me and Steve right there. And there's the summit pyramid. It looks so close, but it's so far away. And so this is May 16th, 1995. And this was summit day on Mount Everest. Getting along the top of the north face onto the northeast ridge. It snowed the night before and left this kind of few inches of snow on top of the shale up there, which made footing difficult. And here's the second step. This is rock climbing at 28,500 feet. So, and you're doing that with a 35-pound pack on your back, gloves on your hands, and crampons on your feet, with about 10,000 feet of air below you.
Nice.
And but at that point it doesn't matter. 1,000 feet, 10,000 feet, kind of the end result is the same. And above the second step, you kind of come around this way, and this is the moon kind of setting as the sun is rising at the top of Mount Everest. And with the rest of the world kind of dropping now away from you, you turn around and look towards the summit ridge. You have this little catwalk right here, and then it looks like you should go up this way, and that's actually not true. It ends up being overhung, so you kind of go up this way and then around to the right. And this next picture I inserted, this is after on my way down, but it shows our route really nicely. So kind of went up this way, switched back, and then just when you think it's going to get easier, you get up to here, and then you have this, and then you turn around the corner, climb up some more rock, and I better.
Oh, you got
hurry
time.
up.
You got time.
It's, yeah, I know it's not advancing for me. I should be able to get it here. I'll get it. There's only a couple slides left. I have my computer plugged in too, but obviously it's not. Anyways, a couple more slides, and there's the summit right there, and then moving closer towards it, and the summit, the final summit is right up there in that snow, and then the view, looking from the top of Everest, looking down, and the rest of the world below you, of course, and getting your summit photos, and that's me and Steve in our oxygen masks on the top, and that's the end of the show.
You obviously made it back.
And I made it back. And I'm wearing sandals just to prove that I kept all my toes.
Yeah.
Too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for sticking around and for bearing through the early part when there's a lot of light out, but now the slides are pretty
That
nice.
looks great.
So if you guys are sticking around tomorrow and you have questions, feel free to come up and say hello. I'll be right here in this tent giving a couple clinics during the day, and thanks again. If you guys are coming through Bishop, come by and say hello. Always love saying hello to folks.